And now, aviation weather around Alaska. Hi there, and thank you for joining me for this Alaska aviation weather outlook. I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, and this outlook will take us up through the end of the week, Thursday and Friday. On this Wednesday, we're watching a low pressure system lift out of the North Pacific up into the central Gulf, and then it's going to be coming onshore vicinity of Cape Suckling early Thursday morning. And a warm front out ahead of this is going to bring windy conditions along with heavy snow and heavier rainfall across the Panhandle into especially northern parts of the Panhandle. Winter storm warning is in effect for the Haines-Klondike highways for as much as 6 to 10 inches of snow this Wednesday afternoon into Thursday morning. And areas further south, especially southern, western, outer coastal areas, and then eventually up through the Gulf, even Yakutat will see snow changing to rain eventually as this warmer air streams northward. The low will then weaken as it moves inland, and we expect MVFR conditions across the middle upper Yukon Valley Thursday morning, but extensive IFR conditions here across the northern Gulf, Wrangell, St. Elias Mountains, all through the Panhandle. Also, IFR conditions. There's a low pressure system riding up along the Kamchatka coastline into the southwest western Bering, and that frontal system is going to spread some gusty winds, precipitation, IFR conditions there across the western Aleutians. Thursday afternoon, we find that the IFR conditions are here in the southeast mainland, especially from around the 40-mile Gold Country south through Northway, Wrangell, St. Elias Mountains, Copper River Basin, northeastern Gulf Coast, and then the southern portion of the Panhandle. The bulk of the precipitation falling this Wednesday night and early Thursday morning. And then we have IFR conditions out there in the western Aleutians, pushing toward the central Aleutians by Friday morning. IFR conditions will linger across areas of the Panhandle, especially the central portions. There's another low that's going to be coming out this weekend. This one will be lifting a little further back toward the west, up toward the eastern Kenai coast very late Saturday night and Sunday morning. So that's going to bring another round of precipitation to areas along the Gulf Coast. As we expect here Friday afternoon, there's a feed of moisture extending north. That's going to kind of pivot back toward the west. So that'll overtake the at least northern half, the Panhandle, with the IFR conditions there Friday afternoon. And some of that moisture from the earlier system lingers as it lifts northward. There could be MVFR conditions there across areas of the east central Alcan border down into the Alaska range. You have milder air also that's being transported northward. The big weather story coming up here is after this weekend, there's going to be quite a surge of mild air spreading northward across much of the state next week. So that's going to have issues with it, even though temperatures are not going to be as cold in certain areas. We'll likely see readings in the 40s here in south central. One thing I do want to point out, though, is the really cold Arctic air continues to hold here through the end of this week and even lingering into the early weekend. North Slope, Arctic coast. Winds may actually pick up here along the Brooks Range. So still the threat of bitter cold, dangerously cold wind chills in areas of the north and along parts of the west coast could linger here easily into Friday, even though the current wind chill warnings and advisories go through Thursday early afternoon. Anaktuvuk Pass will generally see VFR conditions for Thursday. Just a nudge east, Adigan Pass may see some MVFR conditions because there is some moisture that's riding northward with the system that's going to be affecting the Gulf Coast and Panhandle. Lake Clark and Merrill far enough west, the west arm of the Alaska Range, VFR should hold there on Thursday. As we go round up through the central Alaska Range, we could see rainy develop MVFR conditions there by afternoon. Especially toward the west entrance, and then Windy Pass should generally hold on to VFR conditions, but the north entrance, north side there of the Alaska Range could see some MVFR conditions. And then Isabel will become IFR, especially from Isabel Pass eastward as a result of that surge of moisture working its way up across the southeast mainland and interior as it lifts northward. Mentasta Pass should be socked in with IFR conditions, low ceilings, visibilities, snow. And across the Copper River Basin, especially the eastern Copper River Basin, Wrangell, St. Elias Mountains socked in there. Tanita Pass, VFR may become MVFR in the afternoon as Tanita Pass will be on kind of the western edge of that system impacting the Panhandle. And Portage Pass we're kind of expecting a split. The eastern entrance, Prince William Sound and VFR on Thursday, but VFR, middle of the pass, out toward the west entrance. And Chilkoot and White, initially we'll see IFR conditions as we anticipate accumulating snows. There is a winter storm warning in effect for this area for this Wednesday evening, at least into early Thursday morning, and that potentially could be extended if conditions persist, but should see slight improvement as we go through Thursday afternoon to maybe MVFR. And here comes that push of milder air ahead of that low pressure as the low lifts up into the central Gulf and then comes on shore here Thursday morning. We expect a surge of higher freezing levels aloft, 2, 4, 6, 8,000 feet. So there's definitely a push of warmer air, and of course as that warm moist air streams northward, it'll be in the form of snow across here. Back to the west, we've had the cold air come down across since late last week, this weekend, come from the Arctic coast and then down along the west coast and Alaska Peninsula, especially eastern Aleutians. So that's why there's that dip in the surface freezing line Thursday morning. Greatest threat for icing, areas of the Panhandle, southern Panhandle above 8,000 feet. Above 4,000 feet along the northeastern Gulf Coast, and precipitation will eventually change over to some rain there in Yakutat. But the mountains, once you get inside here of the coast, heavier snowfall certainly possible. And that moisture streaming northward, we could also see some areas of light to moderate snow across parts of the east central portion of the mainland, especially encountering the potential for some icing above 4,000 feet. The higher up you go into those precipitation producing clouds. And then out to the west with that frontal system associated with a Kamchatka coastal low, that would anticipate there could be some moderate icing above 4,000 feet there in the western Aleutians. And looking at the jet stream, pretty impressive arc here. We got this jet core of 150 to 170 knots coming in North Pacific across the Gulf into northwest Canada, northern Panhandle. Trough generally sitting here across the mainland, though it's dry within this region. And we have a ridge out here over the western northern part of the Bering. As we drop down to 9,000 feet, broad belt of winds pulling in that milder air and also the moisture across the North Pacific, eastern Gulf, the Panhandle, winds 50, 60 knots and 60 to 80 knots here over northwest Canada, including lower Yukon, especially British Columbia, and then out to the west with that Kamchatka low at 9,000 feet, 700 millibars, southerly flow there into the coast there of eastern Asia at 60, 70 knots. And then Thursday, as we bring it down to 3,000 feet, there is some stronger winds here over the southern Panhandle, maybe 30, 40 knots. Also a little belt here anticipated over the northern Gulf of maybe 30 knots. Not overly impressive. Back to the west, though, along that frontal system, entering the lower southwest Bering Sea, anywhere from 45 to 65 knot southeasterly flow ahead of that low and along the occluded front that'll be working through that region. So the greatest threat for turbulence on Thursday will be across much of the Panhandle, northeastern Gulf Coast, surface to 6,000 feet here through the lower Panhandle, surface to 4,000 feet to northeastern Gulf Coast and northern Panhandle. As we look westward, there could be some pockets of isolated moderate turbulence along the western Seward Peninsula, along the lower Yukon Delta through Etolan Strait, as well as especially north side of St. Lawrence Island, 6,000 to 3,000 feet. And then as we get back out toward the western Aleutians with that frontal system, we expect potential for moderate turbulence surface to 4,000 feet.